Welcome to another episode of the Career Keynotes podcast with Tincup and Gardiner, where William and Andrew chop it up with respected Silicon Valley talent acquisition and HR leaders to get the real story behind their career journeys, along with an insider's view of how companies engage with candidates. Let's face it, these days, finding the job, much less nailing down an interview, is not easy. This is a rare opportunity to learn firsthand what companies are looking for in a candidate and the best ways to engage with them. And now, here are William and Andrew.
Okay, hello again, everybody. Audience, good to see you. I think I say this every time we start a show, but I am very excited about this week's guest. Very bright, very talented talent acquisition practitioner. Took a little doing to get her because she's busy and modest for whatever that's worth. But I am very excited to introduce to you our guest, Maribel. Welcome to the show, Maribel.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Okay, so audience, you know producer Bev, you know William, you know I talk too much. So without spending too much time, Maribel, as you well know, even though we've only known each other for 10 years, that's a lie, audience. I've only known Maribel less than a year, but not long enough. But long enough to know that she's darn good at what she does, and obviously well enough to want to get her on the show. So I talk in effusivity, Maribel. Would you take 2 minutes and just give the audience some context into who Maribel is, your name, what you do? And you don't have to build a piano, just a quick high level, what your story is.
Sure. My name is Maribel Teixeira. Currently, I'm a director at Genentech, director of talent acquisition at Genentech. Been there for 4 years. I've got many years of experience in recruiting. Started my career in agency way long ago. Went in-house, never looked back. I actually have worked in many industries, retail, financial services, tech, and now biotech pharma. So I've had the luck to actually, and very blessed to be able to work with some very key companies. As an individual contributor, as a lead, as a manager, director, I've played many different roles. And so that's just really a broad, quick elevator pitch on what my background is, really.
Perfect. And that opens all kinds of amazing doors. So one of the things that you said that struck me, and I part of the challenge of the show, Maribel, is we make a lot of assumptions and use acronyms and words that the audience may not know. And you say you come from an agency background. I think I know what that means. I'm pretty sure producer Bev and William does. But and by the way, most of the stronger TA people that I know do have that agency upbringing or background. So can you illuminate on that and give us some context about what that means?
So it's a recruiting agency. I guess back then they used to call them staffing. I mean, there's different words that we used to use, but really it was a consulting firm, where you had teams of recruiters and what we call account managers that would support multiple clients in finding talent. And so, we would work with the client. They'd say we need a specific position filled. And then those particular recruiters would go and find those people, present them, and then hopefully they would get hired. It's really kind of just a consulting firm of recruiters and account managers and helping clients fill roles. And it was various industries, various positions. And I spent a few years doing that before.
What do you think it taught you, Maribel? Well, that experience, the dipping in the, dipping into that experience. What do you think it informed later on after you got out of that?
Yeah.
What did it inform?
It helped me learn how to work with clients. So interfacing with clients and providing service and understanding and listening to things that they needed. It helped me learn the ABCs of recruiting. They used to have really good intensive training in how to source, how to work with your clients, how to get clients. And so I think it was a really good training ground for the basics of recruiting. When you go in in-house, it's a little bit different, but what you learn in agency, you definitely bring to in-house. I learned a lot from, it's resilience, determination when you're an agency, because it's very, competitive when you're in an agency. And so you learn that piece too. You learn sense of urgency and wanting to, help your client as quickly as possible, but then also try to be the best, right? And so definitely a very solid training ground.
Is that one of those ones where they taped the phone to your hand, or you couldn't sit down till you felt a wreck? Because you laugh, William, but
No.
yeah.
It was more of they put your name on the board every week. And it was like, who was the top recruiter and the top account manager? And so if you're paired with an account manager and as a recruiter you're lagging, that account manager is on you. You better be producing, because you're on this leaderboard, and if you're not on it, you're as good as what you were on the leaderboard.
Last week.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's probably helped to me. And like I said earlier, a lot of the really sharp, successful TA practitioners that I know, their roots are firmly grounded in the agency. And thank you for breaking that down, audience. So when did you realize, and maybe someone else realized it and pulled you away? As you mentioned, when you work for an agency, you get exposure into different companies, different disciplines, different genres. When did you realize, hey, I could do this anywhere? Or did someone say, hey, that Maribel's a pistol, let's grab her and bring her in house?
Oh my God, it's so long since
Maribel.
Yeah, I'm like, how did I make that transition? I'm like, I don't remember how I made that transition. Hold on. I don't remember why I left the agency. I think because the agency got purchased and things were starting to fall apart. And at that time, there was a lot of people acquiring companies, and everybody was like really collapsing into like stronger agencies, bigger agencies. And so at that point I decided, okay, let me take a look outside. And so I think my next step was a startup. And it was for a company called healthcentral.com. I don't even know if they're still there. And so I did an in-house stint, and I learned a lot there at the startup company. But I also realized that I had a hard time recruiting people into an organization that I knew that was falling apart. And so startup was not doing well. And so I was like, I can't stay here. And so that's when I made the foray into a contract opportunity at the Gap. And that was my first in-house experience. And so I really have to believe in the company that I recruit for. Otherwise, it's super difficult to recruit people into an organization. So that's why I left the startup. I was like, I can't with conscious bring people in if I knew the company was falling apart. So
you'd be surprised at how many people can do that. It is surprising every
time.
Good ones can. Yeah, good ones can't. You're absolutely right, Andrew. So as you look back from this point all the way through to the staffing agency, what's been your toughest assignment? Like what was the toughest thing that you've had to tackle? Somebody's basically said, Maribel, really like you. Do this. We need you to figure out the Middle East peace process. Good luck. What's been the toughest assignment, and why?
Without naming names,
yes.
hiring managers. I started. When I left, I think Gap, I went to Barclays. I think, and they're called BlackRock now because they got acquired. Barclays Global Investors, great company. And I started there as a contractor, and I remember my manager saying, "Okay, you're gonna go support this person in legal." And I was like, okay, great. I'm super excited and ready to go, and didn't really get any context. And I remember scheduling that meeting with that particular person, and just to kind of kick things off. Well, no one had informed me that this is probably the most difficult person to work with in the organization. And they just, for 30 minutes, ripped me, it was the most is the worst hiring manager experience I ever had, where it was like they hated recruiting. You guys are terrible. You don't know what you're doing. I haven't seen any candidates. I mean, it was an attorney, and he was telling me this, and it took me a good while to turn that relationship around. But that was like a landmine. It was awful, but that was the one experience that always sticks in my head. And they just kind of threw me out there, and no one told me anything, and it was probably one of the worst meetings I've ever had. But took me a while, but I turned that relationship around, and by the end of it, we hired and he was happy. So.
Maribel, that just speaks to the fortitude, and it underscores why you're good at what you do. It's classic. Throw the new person, throw them under the bus, and let's see if they can swim. And
Yeah.
here you are. And I'm a big believer in like lessons and challenges. And good for you. I give you a lot of credit because I think people really underestimate how hard it is to recruit. And so that's not an attorneys. Listen, I don't get me started on my best attorney. You know why they bury attorneys 1,000 feet below sea level? Because down deep they're really okay. Okay, this isn't a comedy show. Okay, so Maribel, you mentioned retail, and I don't want to make any assumptions. It could have been the Gap. As luck would have it, producer Bev has she's unmuting. This is going to be good. Producer Bev has a very strong retail background.
Ooh.
She started a couple of Nordstroms and I think a Target and a Whole Foods and maybe a Ross. In any case, producer Bev, because I have to imagine hiring for retail is not easy in some respects and very easy in other respects. So I'm wondering, is there something about retail, producer Bev, that you would like to ask Maribel or her experience there?
Not necessarily about retail, just I did a lot of retail hiring too, and I know it in a lot of senses it comes down to the dollars that they're willing to put out. I actually had a different question that was going to be based more on interviews that you've conducted. There's a lot of rules that people walk in with, like don't trash your old job, eye contact, handshake and stuff. Did anyone ever conduct themselves in such a way that they were polar opposite of what they should do, but it worked?
But it worked?
But it worked. They turned it around and they impressed you by doing something off the beaten path.
Trying to think. I'm going to say no.
I like it.
That's what most people would say. If they know the rules, they broke the rules.
No,
Yeah.
Right.
I'm going to say no because, you have to think broader for your clients too. I mean, sometimes as a recruiter, I can be more forgiving and then I can kind of coach people in the real time. But when you're in the interview process, no, I would say no.
See, and that's very good. Good to know.
Nope.
So Maribel, I have a lot of respect for what you do, and it's not easy. What are some things that you think, to the untrained eye, that are harder or easier for your job? I mean, it's a lot of pressure for a recruiter or someone like you that's in charge of other recruiters and or reporting into hiring managers. I mean, your customers are the hiring manager's clients, really. Your clients are the hiring managers. You have accountability to senior leadership. You have accountability to the candidates that are coming in. It's a lot of accountability. What are some things that you think would not necessarily, that either surprised you or that you think people take, that they don't really understand the complexity of your job? And for me, just to kind of tease it a little bit, like for me, I would hire everybody. Just because, I mean, especially if I liked you or I felt a connection with you, even if you weren't qualified. So having to, sometimes saying no to people would be really hard for me. That's just one example. But as you take a kind of a holistic view of all the recruiting that you've done, what are some things that you think are really challenging that people don't really recognize or appreciate? And then what are some things that are really easy that you enjoy? Because clearly you must enjoy what you're doing. Otherwise you wouldn't be so good at it.
So I guess I'm taking it from not managing a team, but more from just recruiting overall and dealing with the different, I guess, constituents, like you said, hiring managers, candidates, clients, whatever. What I find most challenging and what I've done to really mitigate is really setting expectations up front with everybody, as far as the candidate and the hiring manager. And so that when we go through the process, that there's no huge surprises, whether it's setting expectations on what to expect in the interview, compensation, Hiring manager, this candidate brings this much to the table, but they're lacking this here. We're setting expectations up front. So I think I'm answering your question.
Yeah, you are. You absolutely are.
So that's one of the things. So it's kind of like it's a challenge, but it's almost like also a way how I mitigate it. As far as challenges is, it's always hard to decline candidates, right? But if you're setting expectations up front and you're communicating all along the way, when it gets to the point where you give a final decision to the candidate, it's about being as transparent as possible, but at the same time, it's not a surprise because you've been having conversations with them throughout the process. I mean, it's hard. I think over the years, you have to develop thick skin when you are working with candidates to call them up and tell them, thank you for interviewing. Unfortunately, we're not moving forward. I mean, it's not a good message to hear, but I think if you're setting expectations along the way, that hopefully it's not as awful or as impactful as you want it to be. So,
Maribel, I'm going to hand you.
Oh, here we go.
I'm going to hand you a magic wand. It's actually a pen.
okay.
All right. If you can fix anything in TA from sourcing to onboarding, what would you fix? One thing. You can't fix 5 things. So the wand is singular. So what's the one thing that at this point in your career, you look back, I'd fix this with a wand and it's done.
And the industry. I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Yeah.
We're not picking on it, just philosophically.
Okay. So I don't know if it's philosophical, but I would say if I could have one magic system, one magic.
Everyone lean in. I'm leaning in.
That's a good one.
The one system that captures everything and that you don't have to go over here to do this and over there to do that. One ATS and one system holistically that does, there's not one recruiting tool that's the end all be all. And I think no one's cracked the nut on that. So if I had the magic wand, I would crack the nut on the most holistic system for a recruiter. And so I think that's what I would do with my magic wand.
All right, I'm going to take it back.
Okay.
Audience, just so you know, what she's alluding to is actually very, very sage, because one of the challenges for Maribel or any recruiting or talent acquisition infrastructure is there's a lot of systems and platforms that you have to log into. Some of them are compliance related. Some of them are just to be organized. Some of them she made a really brilliant observation about, you didn't say it, but kind of setting expectations for your clients and for candidates, structured interviewing, if you will, level the playing field. So all these different systems, and it's hard. Like Maribel's job is to recruit, not enter information into 10 different systems. And, it's hard. I think we all know that. All 4 of us know that. But you know it probably better than we do, Maribel, only because you live it. So good answer to a hard question. Okay, Maribel, well, before we pivot and go to the, job seeker side of the thing, what are some things that you think a good recruiter or a good, so I love it when you ask this question, William, so I'm going to ask it. Maribel, if you could go back to your younger self, you kind of fell into this gig because you're good, you care. I'm not putting words in there. And just so you know, audience, Maribel said, hey, I can't work for a company that I don't respect, and I have the candidate's best interest at heart. And for me, those are the things that I look for and not just TA, Maribel, but in general. I always tell producer Bev and William, I can teach you how to type. I can teach you how to answer the phone. I can't teach you to care. And that quality fills a lot of gaps for me. So anyways, backing up, what are some things that you would either tell yourself that you may have done differently? I don't like asking if you have regrets, but any advice for your younger self or someone that's considering? Just so you know, my son got a job offer from Aerotech, which audience is an agency of sorts, like what Maribel got her start at, where they you got to bring in the bacon and your name's on the leaderboard and all that stuff, and he just couldn't do it. It was too daunting for him. He's going to join the Coast Guard, which is very exciting. But back to my point, any advice for your younger self? And then if that's too much or too little, then what are some of the core competencies that you think are super valuable that have served you well, as in your, rather successful career, thus far?
So I think that if I'm talking to myself way back when, things that I maybe would have done differently, I think that, as a recruiter, you have to be outgoing to an extent, right? You have to want to talk to people, and you want to have to network. I think that in my younger years, I was a lot more hesitant and shy. And I think I probably would have built out even a bigger network if I wasn't so. Maybe putting myself out there a little bit more, networking more, and taking risks more. I think that's something that I think I would advise my younger self to. It's okay, take a risk, go out there, network, to become a better recruiter. I think that back then it was, I just, relied on, I'm, hitting the books, I'm going to source, I'm going to, reach out to people, I'm going to talk to people. But I think there's things that you could do to be much more well-rounded. And that's something that I would have taken, I think probably I should have done more of sooner rather than later. And I think that's really one of the core competencies. I mean, you have to network. You have to talk to people. You have to be okay to reach out to people that you never knew. And so I think that's one thing that really kind of sticks out for me. Does that answer? Do you have anything?
It sure does.
That's
I just want
perfect.
someone timestamp this, because everyone lean in. Maribel, we look for portions of the show to timestamp so we can pull out a snippet and use it as an ad. And that was such good feedback. And thank you so much, because then, by the way, that's part of your charm. That's why I wanted you on the show so bad. And it's isn't it ironic? That's what you do, and you're so good at it. But when it comes to you, and by the way, this is a compliment. It's not even a left-handed compliment. That's a good thing to be bad at. It's like being good at dating. You don't want to be good at dating. You just want, you know what I mean? Or you don't want to be good at getting a job. It's a good thing to be bad at. But to your point, you have to if you're not pushing your comfort level or testing the boundaries, I don't know, but I saw William and producer Bev light up, and I lit up when you said it. And I just really admire your honesty and your candor, because here you are. I think we all compare our insides to other people's outsides. Like when I met you, I'm like, oh my God, this gal really knows her stuff. She's engaged, she's bright. People talk highly about her behind her back. And, you weren't super like, oh yeah, when can we talk? I mean, you had really good boundaries. Producer Beth has a question.
I just wanted to dogpile onto Maribel's point that's especially important for women, because a lot of women aren't brought up to self-advocate and open their mouth and get out there. Because when I was a young lady working, I said, oh, my work will speak for itself. It's like, not so much. You have to get out there and bang a drum once in a while. So I just want to champion your point.
Great point.
All right,
Maribel,
continue.
I wanted to go back and unpack the setting expectations, because I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, at this point in your career, how do you teach that? So you've learned it through the course of all the things you've done, but now you've got a bunch of people that report up to you, sourcers, hiring managers, recruiters, and even candidates. How do you teach them how to set expectations? Like what's the secret?
So there's a couple things. I think that it depends on the person, right? So you maybe, you have recruiters at various stages in their professional life. There's some that are early on in career that need a little bit more coaching in regards to that. And then there's some that have been there and done that. And so I think real-time coaching is how I help them in terms of setting expectations, right? Sometimes it's a hard lesson learned where you have a client that has just, escalated and has come to me and said, we have a problem, I'm not seeing candidates. And so it's just a learning opportunity. And you go back to that recruiter and say, okay, here we are. These are some of the things that you can do. And then a lot of times I also have them shadow me, so they can see kind of how I work with clients to kind of kick things off and make sure to how to push back, how to set expectations, how to influence. It's sometimes it's just a lot of practice. Sometimes it's a lesson learned in real time. And that's your coaching opportunity there. So.
Great answer, Maribel. Okay, so we're at that point where we should pivot and now go to, the other side of the show where we ask you, ask the expert. You're going to forget more about interviewing and how companies engage with candidates in the next several minutes than we'll ever know collectively. And just to kick it off for you, Maribel, I think a lot of the people that, and I might, hopefully you can relate. I get a lot of, hey, you know what, my kid just graduated from college. Would you mind talking to them? And even, hey, I know you're in HRTA. Listen, I was wondering, could you take a look at my profile and tell me so you're kind of a career coach by proxy. And that's okay. I think that's a good thing. But as you know, it's not not being good at getting a job is something to be good at being bad at. But one of the tenets of the show is we want to kind of pull as I like how William says it, pull back the veil and tell people, you're as motivated and invested as hiring the right person and helping the company make the decision as they are, probably more so, candidly. And I think there's a perception that, when I send my resume or my interest into the company, someone's going, oh, no, and it's just not that way. So having that big setup, what are some things that come to mind for you, feedback that you have for candidates who are maybe not getting the results that they want? And, before we started, before we were talking before we started recording, I threw out, look people in the eye and no typos, but are there any practical kind of actionable things that come to mind that you think would really help someone that's either new to the job market or kind of afraid that it's the devil that I'm not smart enough, I'm too old, someone that really wants and needs to consider a career change, but just doesn't know what to do?
So, I don't know if these are like golden nuggets or not. These are, like you said, practical, right? And so I think some of these things people forget that make a difference when you're in a job search and you're looking for something. But I think there's definitely a few things that I would remind people. One is making sure that you prepare. You prepare and that you practice, and that winging it is never a good thing. And so prepare meaning, you have an effective resume, your LinkedIn is optimized, and you're networking. That's preparing, right? And then you're practicing. You're practicing to make sure you understand your experience, know what's on your resume. Don't put anything down on your resume that you can't speak to, because that's definitely a trap. But make sure you practice answering questions. And I know that sounds very basic, but you'd be surprised how people are so unprepared to answer a question, especially nowadays that companies are very focused on growth mindset and how would you problem solve. They want to know what your thought process is and how you problem solve. So you can't wing that. You have to practice, right? So that's another thing. I would say that making sure you send thank yous. I have been a recruiter for so many years, and it used to be that it was part of the practice and people did it. And it's amazing how many people do not send thank you notes to the people that they speak to. It goes a mile and it differentiates you from other candidates. So I think that is very super important. And then making sure you follow up, after you interview, as far as whether it's with the recruiter or whoever you spoke to, it's okay to follow up. And if the recruiter hasn't set that expectation when they're going to commute with you next, it's okay for you to reach out to them, so that they understand that you are interested. I mean, those are just a few things that come to mind that I think people don't think that will help them be successful when they're looking for a new opportunity. Those are just a few things that come up at the top of my head. So
You didn't mention it, but I know it's in your repertoire. It probably goes into some of the setting expectations things. But what's your take on candidates asking questions? During the interview process, so much of it is one way, right? What's your bit, or what's your take on them asking a battery of questions of the hiring manager, recruiter, sourcer, anybody they meet?
So I always tell people, make sure you know who you're interviewing with, and then you have questions for each person. And I think that questions are key. That just shows that you've prepared, that you're interested, and that you should have at least 2 or 3 questions for each person that you're interviewing with. And any good interviewer or any interview will allow you to ask questions. You better have questions. Do not show up to an interview without any questions, because it doesn't show that you are prepared or interested. If somebody asks you, do you have any questions? And you say, oh, no, I don't think so. That's not a good thing. You should have questions prepared and ask them.
And not just about when is vacation and how long
And how
it
much
is.
dough?
No, it has to be very meaty. Like, tell me what your expectations are of this. What is your ideal person for this role? What are you looking for? I mean, you have to take, from an HR perspective, if you're talking to an HR person, maybe some of those questions you could ask, but it's more of, well, can you tell me a little bit about, the hiring manager? Do you interface with this person? What's their management style? So if you have questions for each person you're interviewing for, you're prepared, you're ready, and it shows your interest.
Maribel, that was a lean in moment, and that's really, you're so polite and so respectful and so humble, and I admire that. But you're absolutely right. Some of the commonsensical things, I joke around, I think it's not so common. You think, and it's just to your point, it's blocking and tackling. It's second nature for you, and a lot of it goes undone. Okay, I have a question kind of along the lines of what William said about the questions. Feedback. I'm a big believer in positive feedback. No, I'm kidding. No, but feedback. Candidates, look, if I come in and I lay an egg, and then you have an opportunity, right, wrong, or indifferent, to help me elevate my game. Maybe I blew it with you, but the next time around, you could say, hey, Andrew, and I'm making this up, but you know what, Andrew, next time, tuck your shirt in, or whatever it is, just something I said or did. And so what is your position on feedback? And then I know it depends. And so I know you're going to be very appropriate with your response, but I wrestle with that a lot. I want to give people feedback, but I don't want to I'm not the feedback wizard or expert, but I am a big believer in, hey, how can I help you be more successful? And my sense of you is that's frankly the root of a lot of your success, is that you care and you want to help people, which is honestly why you're on the show, help people be more successful. So do you give feedback? Do you only give feedback if people ask you for it? It's a slippery slope. I'm just curious. And this is also audience, I forget who was on the show. You got producer Bev, you'll know, but who was the guy that said, hey, the last question you should ask is
Cadigan.
what was the question?
Is there anything? It's a sales question. So his advice to candidates, Maribel, was before you walk out of the room or the Zoom call, ask the team, is there anything that I've done or you've heard that would hold you back from hiring me? which we all thought was actually really, really, really
Yep,
interesting and compelling, right?
yep, yep.
From a candidate, that's a sales question. That's,
Right.
what would be in the way of you buying this car? That type of stuff. So it's a sales question, but he put it in the frame of a candidate asking the hiring team, which
Mhm,
is
mhm.
really interesting. Anyhow, so your take on feedback.
Sorry, Maribel, but that's kind of where I was going. It's like, that is a great question. And I think a lot of candidates or an audience, if you're listening, I don't know about you, but I don't want to hear you say no. So I probably wouldn't ask that question. I'd rather hear maybe or leave thinking they love me. But for Steve to just say, like, that's pretty black and white, because then it's like, yes, no, like, and then my other thing, sorry, and then I will let you answer the question, Maribel, is the cool thing about those sorts of questions, as I look back, is your mind shifts from emotional to intellectual. So when you say, if I say, hey, will you be on, I'm making this up, but will you be on the show? You say yes. But if you say no, and I can say, well, why? And then the real objection will come out. And most people don't want to flesh out the objection. And most people don't even realize cognitively that your mind shifts from an emotional to a kind of intellectual thing. So back to, what is your take on feedback, Maribel?
So it's I think it could be situational. So I think that working for a company, you have to walk that line. You have to be careful. And so I think that candidates should not take it personal when you can't give specific feedback, because there is that line that you have to make sure you're representing the company, right? And if you provide some information that maybe is not correct or politically correct, or it could be something that could offend, or just put the candidate in a situation where they're just like caught off guard. So it's usually a very it's high level feedback, because you have to toe that line between making sure you don't put the company in a situation where they could be liable for something, for particular feedback. But at the same time, I understand on the candidate side, they want to understand kind of where they fell short. And so if you can kind of give it high level with enough information so that they can catch on in terms of what the feedback was, that's my approach. But it's difficult. And certain things I'll give feedback, like, let me just kind of give you some feedback here on your resume,
Oh, nice.
and so I'll say, okay, in order for you to really be attractive, you should probably consider this. So that type of feedback I'm okay with giving, but if after they interview, you just kind of have to walk the line sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
And
Well,
so I as much as I want to give them really specific feedback, I have to keep it a little bit general to give them enough information so that they can get it, understand, and then hopefully move on. And
so
so
one of the hacks, Maribel,
mhm.
is you're talking about the corporate brand
Yeah,
and representing the corporate brand. You also represent your brand,
right,
because these
right,
are people that eventually you're going to want to recruit again or place at one point. And
right.
so one of the hacks that I've figured out through the years is feedback only comes in one of four ways. It's either positive or negative, and it's either solicited or unsolicited. So it's a
Mhm.
grid.
Yeah.
And the best thing you can
The
do with
heat map.
feedback, right? It's a heat map. But the thing is keeping the brand, both the corporate brand and your brand in mind, is asking permission. So asking
Ooh.
permission of the candidate to say, how do you like feedback? And
Mhm.
again, it can be positive or negative, it can be solicited or unsolicited, but just asking them, and again, staying within the guardrails of what you've already kind of talked about, that the brand, both your personal and the corporate brand are in mind. You don't want to do anything to diminish either of those brands. But I think you can, the simple stuff is really easy. If there is something touchy, it's just, if you built the repertoire, most recruiters are great at this. They've built the repertoire because they've been setting those expectations. Then you can just ask. You can just talk to the person and say, listen, you know, let's talk about this, because now I want to go to feedback, but I want to do things that are appropriate to where you are. So how do you like your feedback? And then again, like Andrew, ironically, Andrew and I are opposite of this. I only like solicited negative feedback. So think about how
Well,
dark
I
that
was
is.
kidding, but
Well,
so you know,
right.
I mean,
But
I wasn't kidding.
right. But
Everybody, it's that old joke, who do you like surprises? And everyone says, I love, well, no, you don't.
yeah.
Your
Depends on
windshield's broken. Surprise.
depends
No,
on the
you only like
surprise.
good surprises. So, but
Well,
I
I mean,
get it.
I'm learning something, right? I'm learning something. I like that grid.
Yeah.
I like that grid approach, and so it's not to say that I don't. I mean, I think that give feedback, but you just have to be very tactful and ensure that you are providing, enough feedback, but not so much feedback that, again, walking that line. And so you're
Right.
right, though, with some people that you do build a relationship with, or just a recruiting relationship with, sometimes you feel more comfortable giving that direct feedback.
100%. And it
yeah.
can be negative and it not hurt the relationship.
Right.
Okay, I
Exactly.
got to ask you about an industry term, and I want your take on it. When you hear the phrase purple squirrel,
Mhm.
what do you think of that phrase and that mindset of a purple squirrel? And again, you've had years of probably people you referencing purple squirrel to you in one way or
Mhm.
another. What do you think about it? And the second part of that question is, do you think purple squirrels know they're purple squirrels?
An audience, if you're just listening to the audio, William's wearing a purple shirt that says frogs.
It's for
It could be
TCU.
a purple squirrel, it could be a purple frog, a purple
It's purple frog. Good
unicorn.
point. Thanks, Andrew.
Yeah, right. So,
What's your take?
I think they exist, and
Oh,
I think purple, meaning like the term is a valid term
Right.
because there are certain things and skill sets that are like, where am I going to find this, and who am I going to reach out to find this particular purple squirrel? And I think some people do realize that they are purple squirrels, and
oh yeah.
I think that those are the elusives, and I think that I mean, purple squirrels, it does exist. I think hopefully not too often, but they do, and those are those challenging moments for a recruiter. If you can crack that purple squirrel, I mean, that is just huge. I mean, that's a huge win for a recruiter. So does that answer your question, William?
100%. 100%.
Okay.
Thank you.
The audience, yeah, Maribel, you're so modest. You've answered all the questions really well. And I love how you diplomatically answered the feedback one, because you're right. It is very personal. And I have a lot of respect for what you said, William. And it is a learning thing. We're all learning. That's why I love the format of the show, because I learned something, everything I know, I learned. So, and it's from talking to people that are smarter than me or more experienced than me. And it's, to William's point, getting over the insecure thing of asking for not necessarily negative feedback, but constructive feedback. What could I have done better? Because I'm not much, but I'm all I think about, right? So would not make the show about me. So I thought you handled that question very diplomatically and very capably with all the right caveats. And, it depends upon the report, it depends upon the person, it depends upon the company. There's so many things you have to manage. And in this day and age, I was talking to producer Bev about this earlier. You have to be very careful about what you're saying, and not just what you're saying, but what you said 3 years ago on Instagram or whatever, a la Chris Harrison. I never watched those shows, but producer Val keeps no, I'm making that up. I don't. No throwing sand. My girlfriend does watch that show and is very informed on Chris Harrison. And I felt badly for him because I don't know, everyone's intentions are good, but it's such a volatile, controversial time right now, and rightly so. I get it, right? Everyone's emotions are raw and it's a difficult time. So I like what you said, William. Ask the person if they want to, well, what's that you always say, producer Bev? If you hang around a barbershop long enough, you're going to get a haircut. I love that expression. Maybe she didn't say that. Maybe
Anything he says, I say, not so true.
Okay. So, okay, well, listen, we're almost out of time. Everybody's busy. So we're at that part of the show before the weird HR story bit. Maribel, let's just say there's one, maybe two things at most that you could say to a candidate as like, if nothing else, do this or don't do that. We didn't even go, what shouldn't you do? That's a whole, we have to have you back on the show. But what one thing, I loved your be prepared. Anything else that you want to leave the audience with that is not just to get them hopeful, but again, anything actionable, practical, what comes to mind? One thing you can tell them besides be prepared, because you already said that.
I don't know if it's an actionable thing, but it's more of a
Anything, Maribel.
philosophy or so I would say that maintaining resilience. I think that it's hard. It's hard to job search. It's a job in itself, as we all know, right? To look for a job and so or your next opportunity. But I think that maintaining resilience, because you're not going to get, sometimes you won't get that first job you interviewed for. You won't make it past the second round. It's okay. You just got to keep going and learning from what that interview did teach you. And that if you just keep the course, that, you'll land what you want. But you just need to be very, just very focused and maintain resilience. I think that's especially in this environment that we are in right now in this world. It's bad enough, we have to deal with this pandemic. We're all working from home. There's maybe not the positions that you're looking for. It's just maintaining resilience was what I would say.
Well, you mentioned it earlier for me, and I see candidates make this mistake all the time, is showing interest and exuding interest in the job. It's vulnerability is what that is.
Yep.
Underneath that interest is, I've got to really want this. I've got to communicate that I really want this, but I've got to really want this, which, oh, by the way, is loaded with rejection management, which
Right.
is resilience. So my question, and this could be, again, you can anonymize it any way you would like, personal or that you've been witness to, what's the most interesting interview experience that you've
Yay! I love this.
seen or been a part of?
Timestamp it.
Or you've heard about it. It's okay if you want to use my friends.
Well, okay, so this is early on in my career, and this is, again, you learn from kind of those things. When I was at the agency, and a big thing when you worked for a recruiting agency was really wining and dining both your client and your candidate. So you take them out to lunch, especially candidates that had a unique skill set, and you really wanted to make sure that they worked with you so that you can place them somewhere, right? So luckily I took a colleague with me, and so we had this one candidate. I don't even remember the skill set it was that they had, but I was like, okay, we need to make sure we develop a relationship with this candidate. So I brought another colleague with me, and we took them to a nice lunch, and it was probably one of the most awkward moments. And I think me now probably would have addressed it differently then. But as we were having lunch, or right before we were having lunch, he decides that he's going to pull his teeth out and put them on the table.
No.
And at that point, I was young. I was new. I was like, what do I do? How do I react? I mean, what do we cut this lunch short? What do I do? And so
what did you do?
Reserved me I looked at him, I looked at my colleague, and then I looked at his teeth, and then he realized that what he did was just inappropriate. And I think it was like a bridge or something, but it was like, it was a nice restaurant, and I was like, okay, how do I address this? But I probably, the person now, I probably would have been like, this is probably not appropriate. You should probably put your teeth away. But I didn't say anything at that point. And then he did it just by the looks. But I will never forget that. And it's a story I tell over and over, because I was like, how do you react to that? And
soft foods. I'm going there.
Yeah.
Soft foods. Jello. Man wants Jello. Pudding. Getting pudding.
I don't know what.
Jello.
He was
mashed potatoes.
Super eccentric and had a skill set, and I was like, okay, what do I do with this? And I don't think I ever placed him. I just was like, oh, right, yeah, I was like, oh.
That was great.
Maribel, That you've just that's the new, when I'm trying to give people William, I like how you asked that question, by the way. It's not like, hey, do you have any weird, creepy stuff? But Maribel,
which by the way, she does. If you want to ask her that question, she has those.
Not of lately, but that was back in the day when, it was just a different way. But it's been a while, but I'll never forget that story. So
I won't either.
It's
a great visual and it's uncharted ground. You've just doubled our ratings with that little teaser. I can't wait to work that into an ad. And then audience, keep your teeth in. For heaven's sakes, I guess we don't have to go to what shouldn't you do.
Actually, we do need to talk about it. Let's be honest.
Keep your teeth in.
That's happening somewhere in the world right now.
No, I'm sure it is. That's a great story, by the way. Made more so by it's true. So I just want to touch on a couple of things because you said a lot of really good things. The resilience, the persistence, don't make it about you. Audience, I know it's hard. We're all in a lot of times, and you know this, Maribel, we all know this. They're like they're shotgunning their thing out and they don't hear back. And I'll never forget, I was chasing after someone that was ahead of TA, and I'm just metaphorically, it's the same thing. I'm trying to engage someone that is very busy, that it probably has a lot of other people like me trying to do it, and calls, emails, voicemails, and then finally I got a conversation and she didn't even know who I was. And it wasn't because she'd gotten my stuff and didn't like it. She just was busy, or it was in the spam. And I'm like, oh my God, I've sent you whatever. And I also loved your thing about, hey, reach back out to me. You know what? So audience, she's asking you to, so don't be, I think, and the other thing you said is so powerful, Maribel, was like, hey, one of the things you said that you want to be better at it, and you're the expert, and that is reaching out and networking and asking for, so whatever, anything, just, it's hard. We don't, like we know George Washington's teeth were made out of wood, but we're not taught to advocate for ourselves in college or in high school. And I like producer Bev's comment about, particularly for women. And I'm glad you said it, not me, but it's anybody. And so that was very powerful. And then I just want to thank you, Maribel. You've done an amazing job. And producer Bev, did you want to ask anything or say anything else?
No, I'm in agreement, and sorry about the teeth thing. That might have been my mom.
No, it was so funny, but not at that time, but it was funny.
Okay, so Maribel, if people want to get in touch with you or connect with you, what's the best way for them?
I would say LinkedIn. I mean, LinkedIn. I live and die by my LinkedIn account, so LinkedIn is the best way. Even so, more than email. I mean, LinkedIn is where it is. So
we'll put your name. How do you spell it and pronounce it? Just so that
it's Maribel Teixeira, and the last name is Teixeira.
It was a baseball player.
A nice, easy one.
I always get asked whether or not he's related, and I'm like, unfortunately, no.
No. He was a good baseball player.
Yeah,
are you talking about Mark?
Yankees?
Yeah.
Yankees.
Doesn't he play for the Rangers, William?
He did at one point. He's actually in broadcasting now, but he was a good ball player. Yeah, it's a good last name.
Everybody, thank you, producer Bev, Maribel, William, audience, like and subscribe, questions, career keynotes. Maribel, thank you again. We'll probably have to do it, and I'm just very grateful. Whatever they're paying you, wherever you work, double it. Okay, everybody. All right, thanks everybody. Until next week, bye.
Thanks for watching this episode of Career Keynotes. For more killer content, please like and subscribe to our channel. We welcome all comments and questions and are grateful for any input regarding future content, topics, and guests. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode.